Hey everyone, sorry about the general lack of uploads lately. It has, of course, been, the holiday season. I did get sick twice, and animatronic exhibits typically aren't really out and about this time of year, around me anyway. But that does bring me to today's topic, my 500 sub special. I know I am so late when it comes to this. I think it hit back in May. Sorry about that, couldn't decide on a specific idea. But my 500 sub special is going to be ranking every animatronic dinosaur exhibit I've been to, or animatronic exhibit, since I have a couple non-dino ones. It's pretty simple, really. This is going to be very similar to the best museum that I've been to video I made back in November last year, with the three primary criteria for my ranking being species selection, animatronic exhibit layout, and how well the animatronics themselves, fit into the exhibit trail or whatever. So yeah, that's really about it. Let's get into this. Starting off, Audubon Zoo 2015 gets an A tier. This was the very first animatronic exhibit I've been to, and also my very first introduction to Billings Productions, animatronics, and it gets an A tier. I will say I didn't properly go through the exhibit itself. I was scared of these animatronics. I was quite young when I went to this. But this guy I found made a video. He went through the entire exhibit, and although the exhibit itself is pretty cramped, the species are all pretty close to each other, it gets a very high A tier. Great selection, and overall, a pretty good exhibit layout. Wish I actually went through it. Next up, Jurassic Quest 2020 in Mobile, Alabama. This was the first exhibit that I actually went to, actually wanted to go to, and it was actually really good. The dinosaurs were spread around the entire place, unlike the most recent time I went, and the species selection is honestly pretty good. Although the only real video footage I have of this place is the Dilophosaurus near the beginning of the exhibit, it's a really good place. I have really good personal memories with this exhibit, so it'll get a high S tier. Dinosaurs Around the World gets an S tier as well. This is a traveling exhibit, sometimes indoor, sometimes outdoor, and it was in the Mobile Science Explorium. I don't remember the exact building name, but it was there the same time Jurassic Quest was there, so I went, checked it out, and although the species aren't really, the animatronics aren't really that much better quality-wise than Jurassic Quest, and there's arguably a lot less species, it was pretty good. They had 2 or 3 species per continent, so it had a pretty good variety, I've got to say. Very good memories with this place as well, so it gets an S tier. Quick note, all video footage belongs to me. This is all my video footage. Dinosaur Adventure was fine. It gets a C tier. A high C tier, though. This was the first drive-through exhibit I went to in January 2021. The first and only drive-through exhibit so far. And it was pretty okay. It had a lot of species variety, for sure. And the exhibit itself was honestly pretty decently sized, since it was in a parking lot in New Orleans. But there were admittedly a bunch of the more generic species to be featured, like Parasaurolophus, Oviraptor, Carnotaurus, Herrerasaurus, and there was a severe lack of signage in the exhibit itself, so guesses had to be made as to what animals there were. Of course, that wasn't hard to guess, but I still would have liked it for there to be signs. C tier is honestly kind of fitting for me. It wasn't an awful exhibit, but there were some changes I would have liked to be made. Columbus Zoo Dinosaur Island 2021 was my first introduction to Dino Don, and overall, it was a pretty good exhibit. I give it an A tier. It had a good variety of animals, for sure. First place I've heard of a rhynchosaur, that's for sure. That's not even a dinosaur. And overall, the exhibit was pretty well set up. It had a lot of species, and being Dinosaur Island, there's only, so many ways that animatronics can be properly displayed on the boat path, but, either way, it was a pretty good exhibit, and with it being my first trip to Columbus Zoo, and my introductory exhibit to Dino Don's company, it gets an A tier. It was honestly a pretty good exhibit. Nashville Zoo Dino Trek 2022 gets an S tier for me. This was my first proper introduction to Billings Productions, and overall, it was a honestly really good exhibit. There was a good amount of species variety, for sure, and the animatronics themselves were well integrated into the natural environment. That looked pretty, realistically placed. The exhibit itself may have been a little bit cramped, as it has a relatively short walking trail, but Overall, I can't complain that much. I've got great memories of this exhibit and 2022 in general. Plus, again, it was my first proper intro to Billings production, so I'll be giving Nashville's Dino Trek 2022 an S tier. The Columbus Metropolitan Library gets a B tier. I believe that's the building name anyway. But yeah, they just had 3 of Billings animatronic dinosaurs, Triceratops, Stegosaurus, and Megalosaurus. None of them were turned on, unfortunately, which gives them a B tier, but it was pretty cool anyway. Dinosaurs at a library. Haven't seen that before. And it also served as like the prequel event to my trip to Columbus Zoo 2022, Dinosaur Island, which gets a C tier. These were all Billings, and so usually that would give this exhibit a higher ranking out of me personally, but compared to my 2021 trip, there was fewer species, and they were all more widely spread out, especially across the boat ride section. And adding on to that, the last 4 species of the ride were all herbivores. Now, I'm sure they were trying something out instead of, always ending on T-Rex, which... almost always, anyway. They've ended with Giganotosaurus twice, but I wasn't there for either of those instances. But, even still, I feel like ending with 4 herbivores, especially their juvenile Brachiosaurus model, is kind of underwhelming, so it gets a C tier. If anything, it was where I learned about Tawahale. Never heard of that guy before until I went here, so that was pretty nice. C tier, I suppose. Detroit Zoo Dinosauria 2022 gets a B tier, despite the misleading title of Dinosauria, since they had 5 species that weren't dinosaurs, Deinosuchus being the closest to being one. It was a pretty decent exhibit. These were Dinodon again, and again, there was a pretty good variety of species, definitely, and none of them felt like too close together. The trail itself was pretty decently sized, but it was also pretty straightforward. It wasn't really especially unique. It was mostly a straight line that 180'd back around. But, outside of that, there, for me anyway, really wasn't that much to note on. It was a decent exhibit, but I'd personally give it a B tier. St. Louis Zoo Emerson's Dino-Rorus 2022 gets an A tier. Maybe a really high B tier, but right now I'm putting it in A tier. It was a pretty decent exhibit, gotta say. It was Billings Productions made again, though admittedly didn't have a ton of species. I think only 14 or 16. However, their animatronics were organized in roughly geologic order regarding when the animals themselves lived, so that was pretty nice. First and only place I've seen an installed animatronic Sarcosuchus, and Euoplocephalus, actually, for that matter, although that guy wasn't turned on when I was there. The Move-It-Yourself Dimetrodon in the gift shop was a pretty nice addition, and the exhibit layout itself was honestly pretty nice, I gotta say. So overall, I'll give St. Louis's Emerson Dino-Rorus 2022 an A tier. Might be high B tier, but right now it's an A. Jurassic Quest 2023, this time taking place in the Dayton Convention Center instead of the Mobile Convention Center, and it gets an A tier. It was pretty fine. The general layout was fine, but I don't really like it as much compared to my 2020 trip, where now it was basically a singular path that you had to follow to get to see all the animals and then reach the gift shop area. I preferred it when it was all the creatures are spread around everywhere and you can walk wherever you want. The species variety is honestly still pretty good, about the same as it was the first time I went, so I'm fine with that. I will say I'm a bit disappointed they've mostly discontinued their Ancient Oceans mini exhibit. I was looking forward to seeing those guys again, but oh well, I suppose. For now, I don't know when I'll go back to Jurassic Quest again, but for now, the 2 times I have gone are good enough, and the most recent being 2023 gets an A tier out of me. Columbus Zoo Dinosaur Island 2023 gets an S tier. This is so far my favorite iteration of Dinosaur Island that I have been to. Again, these were made by Billings Productions, and this is so far the first and only time that I've seen a few of their updated models, specifically their new Triceratops, Brachiosaurus, and Pachycephalosaurus models, as well as this exhibit checking off some of their species that I haven't seen before, those being Pachycephalosaurus, Protohadros, and Deltadromeus. I'm really not too sure why this is my favorite iteration of Dinosaur Island that I've seen so far, but whatever the real reasoning may be, it gets a strong S tier out of me. Jurassic Adventure at the Omaha Zoo's Wildlife Safari Park extension gets an A tier from me. So with this being a safari park, you get to drive through the animal enclosures and take a look at them like that, which is pretty cool. First safari park I've been to. And the dinosaurs made by Dino Don were spread across the entire park, so that was pretty neat. Unfortunately, there wasn't a whole lot of species variety, I think only 12 or 13 species, but I did get to meet a friend I met online a couple years ago. We both went out to Omaha to meet each other. That was really fun, great memories with that, so this exhibit will get a high A tier out of me. Jurassic Empire gets a mid or low C tier, and I don't want to put them too far down because based on other promo stuff I've seen, it's clear that they want to kind of do what Jurassic Quest does with a traveling animatronic dinosaur exhibit, but their animatronics just generally aren't of the highest quality. I mean, Jurassic Quests aren't either, comparatively speaking, to others I've seen, but with Jurassic Empire, at least the location that I went to, most of their animatronics were very closely knit. Only a select handful of them were really moving, and so based on the criteria I proposed at the very beginning of this, based on that, I'm gonna have to put them in a low C tier. I don't want to push them into D, but the later tiers or later entries might end up having that happen. But so yeah, that was the first half of my animatronic tier list. It was pretty decent, got through this pretty quickly, I've got to say. Now I gotta edit this. Oh, great. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the first part of this. The second part should come out sometime soon. Shouldn't be all that long, I hope anyway. Hope you enjoyed. It's a lot less likely, but if you've been to any of these exhibits, less likely compared to having been to any of the museums I listed in my museum ranking video. If you've been to any of these exhibits, would you agree with my ranking? Or just by watching the videos themselves, would you agree? I'd like to know. Anyway, see you in part 2.